In some ways, yes, and in some ways, we are turning that corner around since we have had that office relatively empty for about 5 or 6 years with administration. We've had Dr. Antonio Castro in there the past couple of years. We're redefining it. We're changing some of the methods in which we identify students. We're doing more professional development, trying to do some additional kinds of things to re-energize and refocus.
So in the coming year or two, will we be dedicating more time and resources to students than we have in the past few years? Is the trajectory level up or down?
Well, we're hoping the trajectory level is up, and that's through professional development. And when you see what the practices are in the classrooms, we're seeing more teachers, more schools, more opportunities with the instructional program, because we don't now and never have philosophically had a special program that's built in and embedded within the instructional day.
Thank you.
Mrs. Phelps?
My question is going to be, was Dr. Castro responsible for this still, or does he have someone particularly who's serving as a coordinator now in his office?
No, I think he'd like to have that if you're interested. I'm sure. But no, he's serving as our program coordinator.
I have one more question.
Mrs. Buckles, yes?
We're accepting students who've been tested in other districts. If they come to this district, we're accepting what the other district recommended.
No. Are we doing that now?
Well, based on this, we will. But if you look at the language more closely, we reserve the right to verify and make sure that we're putting the right kids in the right place, because we don't always know what the other states' requirements are or the thresholds there. But we don't want to turn kids away. We want to accept them as they've been identified, and if we have concerns, we'll verify.
Well, it never made sense to me when we moved here.
Yeah.
My daughter had been identified in LAUSD and was in a gifted magnet. And we came here and they retested, and it just didn't make sense to me that we would do that when we spend the money to do that when it was a local California school.
Part of this change was in years past, because of the strings attached, if you will, the categorical funding, we had to write a plan as a district. Plan is in the district that was pushed onto the state and approved by the state, included that exact thing. And this gives us flexibility to be more inclusive and offer greater access, as opposed to shutting the door before someone gets here and then have to earn their way back in. So we will accept that and honor that, and if there's a great challenge, but we're seeing something, we'll have a parent meeting, we'll talk about it. Antonio will be there.
Thank you.
So I have a bad feeling that this might make me unpopular, or maybe less popular might be a better description, but last year at the CSBA annual conference, I attended a session on gifted and talented education. And honestly, I came out of that session thinking that maybe we were not looking at this issue correctly. And now I'm reading this board policy and I'm thinking the same thing again. And so let me share with my fellow board members why I'm concerned about this. The old policy, warts and all, referred specifically to students that tested as having a high IQ, or with talents and abilities in classical instructional areas like mathematics and English and languages. And but the new policy talks about creative ability, and that giftedness can be recognized. So a person could be gifted because they're a fantastic dancer, Well, I'm not sure that our attempts at identification are really appropriate for this broader classification of giftedness. I mean, I see this shall. The superintendent or designee shall identify. Shall means must, right? Identify students for the district's gifted and talented education program on the basis of demonstrated or potential intellectual development. That's sort of like the old 150 IQ wording from the old policy. Creative ability. Okay, now you're taking me, I am a huge admirer of creative ability, but that's on the third true paragraph on page 64 under board policy. And so how are we as a district going to answer the mandate we're creating here? We shall identify students based on creative ability. How are we going to do that? I almost feel that and this is how I felt after I saw this CSBA session last year. I felt like they were saying all students are gifted. Well, if that's the case, why are we spending money on testing? Why don't we just let everybody self-identify for their giftedness? Sounds like the Acacia model. Why don't we let everyone self-identify for passion and a desire to focus and save the money on the testing? I mean, is anybody seriously going to self-identify as a physics genius and not be a physics genius? I mean, do we need to test them to make sure? I'm just confused about where we're going with this.
Dr. Connolly, I can tell you from having been a site principal over the years, there is certainly the intelligence test, the IQ test that's used. But I've also had students, even in primary grades, where they had a remarkable, prodigious talent in the arts. I've seen a kindergartner identified as gifted. Dr. Calvin at the time assembled a team of experts from local universities and psychologists, and the student was given a time, and the student actually created artwork that astounded you. You thought an adult did it. I've also seen students write symphonies. I've seen, in fact, there's a gentleman here that you saw earlier this evening. His son in 4th grade played the violin. They had professors in music from Cal State Northridge and some others that Dr. Calvin again assembled. And that student demonstrated his giftedness. Now, that doesn't speak to what you're saying as far as all students being gifted, but that is how those other creative sides are demonstrated.
I completely understand that, and I do not doubt in any way, shape, or form that there are extraordinary gifted and talented students. I guess I'm asking, after assembling this group of experts and after spending hours of Dr. Calvin's time on that, what do we do for that child that justifies the expense of identifying that child? So that I'm trying to ask myself, what are the services or the opportunities that we're going to provide to the extraordinary composer of 7 years that we're not going to provide to someone else? Because I don't want an identification program that doesn't do something with the identification. I'd rather spend the money elsewhere. That's what I'm asking.
You ask really great questions because times have changed. Times are changing. And we've been having significant conversations at the executive cabinet level about access and equity and how many different children over time can be excluded from a very young age from having the opportunities to participate in gifted and talented programs, maybe because of a solo test that is given at one point in time, one day. And over time, some of those practices have expanded to include some teacher recommendations and parent thoughts. But sometimes it's been tied exclusively to that testing, and I think that that's where this particular policy and regulation open up those other pieces. And one of the things, and I will be prepared when I come back to the board in January to share with you my findings from the green print groups, we've had many parents and teachers and administrators talking about gifted and talented and opportunities for all children. And what does that mean? Does it mean for that child who has the uber skills as a scientist versus the dancer? And many parents were saying, I have a child who's very gifted in language arts, but not in mathematics. And it's okay that my child is in honors language arts, but not mathematics. And how do we say that that's okay and really allow students to pursue their passions in certain areas? And I believe that as we continue to look at this, when you're talking about that self-identification, you're right. Students and parents will not self-identify most likely in an area where they are not excelling. But what this is telling us is not only the demonstrated, but the potential for development. And I think that that's where some of the movement of this is occurring in the GATE world, is that we're looking for potential, where it's students who may not be there yet, but we know that with the proper support, they could benefit from GATE programs. So I think that that is something that I will be bringing to you as some themes and some ideas that have come out of these focus groups, and staff will be better prepared, I think, to have some more substantive conversations. And it could be that we're looking not only at changes in practice, changes in resources, pedagogy, but maybe changes in other board policy as well when we're looking at some of these pieces.
Mrs. Phelps?
I think what you were saying, though, is exactly what Betsy's concern is. Because you said, we will identify these students who can benefit from GATE programs. The big question is, what GATE programs? We have never had a GATE program in this district, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's something that the district decided a long time ago that we wouldn't segregate kids, so they didn't get opportunities to do, exceptional things in their classes, or exceptional, like these day classes, or, many of these things that are listed as possibilities. I don't think this district is, all it's offered is, you can be in honors classes, you can take AP classes, and you can do more homework, and that's being a GATE student here. So I'm glad you're looking at it, and hopefully we will have a GATE program, because like Mrs. Buckles, that's one of the things that eventually got me to this point, because I GATE identified kids who were not recognized as GATE in this district, and repeated classes and years, and just not a good discussion for me to have tonight.
And you bring up a great point, that word program. Is that something that's discrete and unique and separate? Because so many times we use that, what is a GATE program, versus practices, pedagogy, opportunities for kids, and how do we bring great opportunities for kids every day in every educational setting. And that's what I think we really need to be looking at that.
Mr. Anderson, your light was on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciated Pat's comments and Dr. Conley's comments, and I'm going to tie back to Mr. Yates's comments and what I felt as he was speaking. And what I felt was, yeah, we're still putting some money into it. There's no categorical, but we're putting the money into teacher training. And okay, that's fine. And we're not going to have any specific breakout sessions or classes, but the teacher's going to be better able to reach all students regardless of what they think they're special at or their parents think they're special at. And so the definition, if I had gone back 20 years, I thought the definition of GATE was this, and as a parent, and now I see the definition is this. So it's And the money ebbs and flows as we need to use it somewhere else. So why do we even have a program? So are we going to end up, pulling a few names out of the hat to fill out the report at the end of the year so we can say we met the budget?
Well, the only other thing I would like to say about this proposal, this board policy and administrative regulation, it's better than the last one. And so if we're going to have a placeholder, something that sits in our board policy and administrative regulation that is closer to the reality of what we offer and what we intend, this is closer to that. And I can see the value of having a placeholder for this in our board policy and administrative regulation. At least it doesn't list things that are totally not happening. But I consider this a placeholder, and if we're gonna put it in place, I don't think it's gonna be there for very long before we're gonna wanna take another look at it and have it more closely resemble the promises that we're making to parents and students and the expectations that we have. This just isn't it, yeah. So, but there you go. We don't like it that much, though.
I don't have a problem with that. But I will tell you that even before the downturn, the state and those who've been involved with gay education for a long time will tell you that it just, each year, dwindled in terms of dollars, dwindled. Then it became a flex account. And then we were surviving, as I had mentioned. So I don't know that it requires a lot of dollars, but there really is not a lot of dollars being used right now for gay. We are trying to support it through some of the enrichment LCAP goals, through the enrichment opportunities at the schools, and some monies that have come to the schools for remediation, additional monies that this board approved a year ago to go to the schools for remediation and for extension. And so that's how schools are trying to incorporate some of the GATE types of activities and programs, for lack of a better term, on the campus.
Anything else, or I would just like to ask my fellow board members, 2 weeks from now, or whenever it is when we're back here again, are we going to have trouble saying shall, when we know the reality? Are we okay with the language? Because if we need to make a shift, it would probably be nice if we gave Mr. Yates a heads up.
Do we have an option on that word?
May.
It's our policy,
Well,
so we
I know that
absolutely have an
sometimes you
option.
have policies that we really need to do this, so if we have a choice, I think it would be best to...
Mr. Yates, so we're not following a state ed code mandate language-wise, so,
No, I mean-
so you want to think about that?
I don't
as
need to
a-
think about it, I like may a whole lot better than shall. I don't have to think about that.
I don't see that being a problem. In fact, some of the shall pressure or requirements from the previous one have been lifted because of it's an LCFF program, and so we've got great local flexibility on that, so I think may would work fine.
I would be more comfortable with it that way going forward. If you take a look and just correct anything that gives an impression that we aren't going to be able to satisfy on the short term.
May I also just point out in the paragraph that follows that we're still okay though, where it says the superintendent designee shall provide all eligible students, including the disadvantaged English learners and students and so forth, opportunities to succeed. So that shall, we need to make sure that that's in place.
Yeah, that's an actual shall.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I think that reflects the intent of the board, yeah. All right, we'll look forward to seeing it swept of some of the shalls. And that brings us to our next item and last item, which is item D on page 69, Ventura County Office of Education Williams Activity Report for first quarter of fiscal year 2015-16. Any discussion, questions for staff? I do not see any, in which case we are adjourned. Thank you very much.